We know everything. Thanks.
And you know nothing. It's a shame you're not a woman anymore. I should have understood.
Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen what I have seen.
And by the way, the women are always saving the men around here. You might want to think about changing the name to X-Women.
No, this magic belongs to no boy.
Because I'm a girl and girls can't be witches.
So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
So let's just start right off the bat by saying Season 1 of the live-action One Piece was really, really good.
So good.
I mean, it had no right going as hard as it did, and I may or may not have rewatched it way too many times already. It's almost like the studio learned its lesson from Cowboy Bebop and realized if you respect and celebrate the source material, people will be more receptive to it. Anyways, I love anime, but I had no previous experience watching or reading One Piece, mostly because of the fact that it's over 1,000 episodes and that really intimidates me. I mean, I can barely get through a 12-episode anime. It's the hill I never felt compelled to climb, and to be honest, I still don't. I'm just gonna wait for the Wit Studio reboot of the One Piece anime to come out, and I'll jump on the bandwagon then. So amongst all the show's strong qualities like interesting story, world building, music, which listen to Sonia and Marcine popping the fudge off. There was no reason to go this hard, yet they did it anyways. But yes, amongst the show's several strong qualities, the character work is what really stands out. And it's not because of some deeply intricate character study or a look into the psychology of a pirate. No, what's awesome is it's not complicated character work at all. It's straightforward and simple. It's a show about pirates where the main character Luffy dreams of finding the One Piece and becoming the Pirate King.
Because I'm gonna be king of the pirates. And I will be king of the pirates. And I will be the king of the pirates. And I'm gonna be king of the pirates. And become king of the pirates!
You shut up!
The show is basically Luffy asking people, hey, what's your dream? And those characters sharing their dreams with him, and then eventually joining his crew because Luffy is just so dang likable. And then everyone grows closer together and supports each other in their dreams. And we, the audience, are able to invest in their dreams as well because we connect with the characters since we see where they're coming from. Simple yet effective stuff. And the big standout from all of these characters is no doubt Nami. Although let's be real, my personal favorite is Sanji. For reasons. Anyways, Nami is the Straw Hat Pirate's navigator. We establish in episode 1 that she's smart, determined, and is a skilled thief who has her own agenda. She starts off as a standoffish and closed off to others kind of gal.
I am never joining anything with you. I hate pirates. Hate them.
But throughout the season, she begins to open up more and more to Luffy and the crew until she eventually fully accepts them. Her character journey is the emotional core and focus of this first season, and it's very effective. In fact, she was such a good protagonist that I forgot she happened to also be a strong female protagonist.
Well, what do you think?
That's a woman?
And it got me thinking about how her character stands in protest against everything Hollywood has been trying to push in a strong female character for the past decade or so. And what do I mean when I say strong female character? No, I'm not referring to characters like Rita Vertasky, Vi, Buffy, Mia Djokovic in those absurdly fun Resident Evil movies, The Bride, Elizabeth Bennet, Jane Eyre, Elle Wood, and obviously the GOATs like Ripley, Leia, and Sarah Connor. Which, did you guys notice on that list there are characters who aren't strong in the stereotypical badass fighter way, but in their mental fortitude and strength of character kind of way? Almost like women don't have to have big muscles to be considered strong. Crazy notion, I know, in this modern day and age. So what is the strong female protagonist that the media has been feeding us? And when I say feeding, I mean shoving down our throats until we beg them to stop, only for them to turn the crank up to 11. Well, in essence, a strong female character is meant to be the opposite of the damsel in distress stereotype. Where the damsel in distress lacked agency as a character and needed a man to come save her, the strong female character is meant to have their own agency and not require a man to come and save them. This inherently isn't a bad thing. We love ourselves a badass woman that can get herself out of a sticky situation using her own wits, resourcefulness, and strength. The problem is that this trope has gone way overboard to the point that a strong female protagonist is not allowed to show any weakness, lest she be viewed as weak in any capacity. A strong female protagonist is not allowed to be saved by a man because she's too strong and independent to need to be saved. Remember how Eric saves Ariel at the end of the animated Little Mermaid? Yeah, that's against the rules. Thankfully, Disney rectified this and had Ariel save Eric in the climactic scene so that we can revel in her girl bossness.
Okay.
In essence, we used to have damsel in distresses that were one-dimensional characters because they were defined by their helplessness and inability to have agency separate from a man. And now we've traded that for the strong female protagonists who are one-dimensional characters because they're defined by their inability to be written with any weakness and therefore depriving them of any character development since they're a one-note tune.
Now who's the damsel in distress? Straight up.
And this stereotypical character trait has been so heavily pushed in the entertainment world that not only are most people who critically look at movies aware of this trope, but even normies are starting to become aware. There are many reasons for the popularization of this archetype in Hollywood, and from what I've seen, we didn't really start seeing these toxic strong female characters until the mid-2010s, such as Rey in The Force Awakens and the female-led Ghostbusters movie. And don't you worry, children, we'll get into exactly why women written like this are classified as toxic strong female characters. And at the time, when we'd see women written in this way, it was still rare enough that we didn't really bat an eye. We just saw them as one-offs, as badly written characters that happened to be female. But it seems like Hollywood went into massive overdrive with producing these types of characters in reaction to Harvey Weinstein and the subsequent Me Too movement when that story broke back in 2017. Once that happened, it seems like every studio was like, we need to affirm women's strength, specifically their strength over men. And we started seeing an exponential increase in these types of movies and shows.
Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
This modern strong female protagonist is now a given in most mainstream media, and we're told this is progress, and you better like it unless you want to be labeled as one of them sexists.
I'm not sexist. Being sexist is wrong. And being wrong is for women.
And in order to virtue signal the world about how they comply with this version of progress and female representation, many modern movies and shows nowadays will use the Bechdel test to judge whether a piece of work has sufficient women representation, even though the woman who created the test only made it as a joke. Well, screw the Bechdel test as gauging how well women are represented, because frankly, as we've seen recently, a piece of media can pass the Bechdel test with flying colors, but fail spectacularly at actually representing a woman that feels like an actual person. In order to gauge how well women are represented, let's instead use a test I made up, well, definitely not under the influence of alcohol, which means it's basically on the same level as the Bechdel test. I call it the Please Expel Nonsensical Ingenue Stereotypes test, and we'll use this test to judge whether a female character is represented as an actual three-dimensional character rather than the one-dimensional modern strong female protagonist we've been getting fed. And who better to test this on than Nami? Absolutely flawless segue. Now, in order to not be deemed a one-dimensional strong female character, there are 4 subtests in this overall test that the female character must pass. If our character fails any of these tests, this automatically puts our strong female protagonist in the toxic and modern female protagonist category. Let's start with our first test. Does the strong female protagonist have a stagnant character arc where she undergoes little to no personal growth throughout the story being told? If you haven't caught on yet, modern strong female protagonists are not allowed to have any weaknesses, because if a woman is shown to be weak, then you're acknowledging that women are not the self-insert badass femme fatale who can do no wrong that we're trying to manifest into existence. But not allowing your character to have a weakness and thereby creating a character who makes no mistakes robs the audience of a character they can relate with. More often than not, the female's character arc will be the strong female protagonist starting the story unable to embrace how amazing and strong she is, but through all the other characters in the story affirming her amazingness, she comes to realize, yeah, I am kind of awesome, and she embraces her inner and outer strength so that she can overcome whatever conflict this story has, which bonus points if the conflict is the patriarchy. And this arc of self-actualization is being sold to us as a legitimate character arc, which, spoiler alert, it's not. Because again, the reason an audience invests in a character in the first place is we empathize with their situation or struggle. We latch onto their journey and we feel invested in seeing them achieve their goals. If we have no reason to think they'll fail at succeeding in their goal, then it's going to be hard to be invested, because the struggle is what makes the protagonist reaching their goal feel satisfying. I think a really popular example of a strong female protagonist with a flat character arc is Captain Marvel.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
There's a lot of good videos that dissect this in more detail, but essentially we see Carol start off the story with her powers nerfed and everyone telling her that she's not good enough or she'll never reach her full potential because she's too emotional, even though we never actually see her lose control of her emotions. Instead, she just spends the movie with this face, and sometimes she displays slight personality traits like she'll make a joke and you're like, oh, I guess she's kind of funny, but then she'll never be funny again. Mostly you just can't get a read on her and you're left with a plank of wood, which that comment is actually a disservice to Plank, the piece of wood, because he has way more personality than her. Which, to be honest, it isn't Brie Larson's fault, because hot take incoming, I think she's kind of a talented actress. Like, she was great when she was on the indie circuit, and I can say this and still think she comes across as a bit over the top in interviews, to say it delicately.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
But anyways, all this to say, we spend the whole movie with this nothing burger of a character.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
So by the time she finally decides to break the chains of the system and embrace the inner girl boss that she always was at the climax of the movie, we super don't care because we were never invested in her as a person. She gave us nothing to latch on to. I was rooting for you. I wanted you to succeed. Just give me something. Anything, please. Imagine how much more impactful her self-actualization moment would have been if she spent the whole movie actually showing us that she struggles with her anger, that she really does have a hot temper that gets her into trouble, and then at the end she's able to overcome this character flaw in order to defeat the villain. Or maybe she realizes her emotions are her strength and she learns how to channel them effectively. In the comics, Carol struggles with alcoholism apparently, which could have been an interesting aspect that plays into her character. They could have made her angry about the fact that she's lost her memories, and maybe she uses alcohol as a coping mechanism. But no, even though that sounds like a mighty interesting character to follow, it's more important to never show a woman in a negative light in the name of progress, especially when the villain of the movie is meant to represent institutionalized sexism. So, with all this in mind, does Nami from One Piece experience any sort of character arc ? Does she experience personal growth that allows her to overcome the conflict she's facing?
Yes!
As I mentioned earlier, Nami's character arc is the emotional core of season 1 of live-action One Piece, and that's not to detract from the other characters' stories, because as we know, I watch One Piece for the sweet, sweet character arcs. It's more just saying that throughout the season, we see Nami slowly change and grow until the payoff for Nami's character arc comes to a head in the penultimate episode of the season. Like many strong female protagonists, Nami starts off as seemingly standoffish and arrogant. Her initial goal is to steal the map to the Grand Line, which she attempts to do on her own, and she only allies herself with Luffy because their goals happen to align. In episode 2, she finds out that Luffy's hat is extremely special to him, and uses his love for his straw hat against him in order to abandon him and Zoro and escape when they're captured by Buggy. So yes, she starts off as a protagonist that we really don't want to root for, and if she stayed in that same place of cold and arrogant for the whole season, then she would absolutely fail the PENIS test.
Penis jokes.
But throughout the season, we find out that her initial cold demeanor is just a facade, a defense mechanism to keep people away. Remember how I mentioned she tries to escape by using Luffy's love for his hat against him? Well, we immediately see her stop dead in her tracks when she sees the devastation that Buggy has wreaked on the town. She's not cold and uncaring, but in fact cares deeply for people. And I love that the episode ends with Nami fixing Luffy's hat, which got messed up in the battle with Buggy. Even if she doesn't understand why Luffy cares so much about the hat, she acknowledges the love he has for it through this action and shows she has begun to care for him, because friendship is all about caring about what your friends care about, even if you don't understand it yourself. And watching Nami start to open up to the people around her is extremely rewarding. Seeing her try to steal from Kaya in the next episode, only for her to have girl talk with her and ultimately decide to return all the things she stole. Trying to stop Zoro from engaging in the suicidal duel with Mihawk because she started to see the crew as her friends, which you can also see the progression she's gone through based on her line delivery of this in episode 3.
I hate you guys.
And this in episode 5.
You guys are the worst.
We see throughout the season that she's shouldering a huge burden and that at any moment she seems so close to breaking, which props to Emily Rudd for selling this, because every time one of the crew calls her out, you can just see the inner conflict between her eyes.
That's what I call an inner conflict.
And again, this all comes to a head in episode 7 when we realize that she's been working for the pirate Arlong, who killed her adopted mother with the goal of buying her village's freedom from his pirate crew. And she never wanted to feel loss again, so she never told anyone in her village the truth, leaving all of them to blindly hate her. But again, Luffy and the crew have slowly broken down her barriers, which leads to the best moment of the season, when Nami's plan to free her village has failed, and she knows she can't help them on her own. Seeing Nami break down after spending the whole season looking like she was constantly on edge and shouldering a huge burden was an incredible payoff to her character journey. And freaking Sonya, being the badass composer that she is, literally wrote a song using Nami's instrumental theme to express her emotional journey. But yeah, this scene and this song brought me to tears. Because guess what? I can relate to how Nami feels. I can empathize with her struggle. And that's not just because I'm a girl either. Nami's struggles are something all humans, whether male, female, white, black, or whatever, can relate to. Because the idea of shouldering a heavy burden at the cost of our own well-being without relying on others is a pretty universal idea that most people can identify with. Therefore, she's gonna appeal to a vast spectrum of people, and because we can relate with her struggle, that makes us want her to succeed all the more. Nami starts the season on a ship all alone with no friends, and she ends the season on the Going Merry with a crew of friends by her side who gift her with tangerine trees to remind her of home. If that's not a compelling journey, then I don't know what is. Now on to the next test. Number 2, does the female protagonist take accountability for her actions? Now let's operate based off of the definition of accountability, which is the fact of being responsible for what you do and able to give a satisfactory reason for it, or the degree to which this happens. Basically, taking responsibility or being transparent for one's own actions. For example, you know how in a typical rom-com, the female protagonist will tell some sort of white lie, or there's something they're keeping from the male love interest and the people around them, and at the climax of the story, the truth comes out and it causes a rift in the female and the male protagonist relationship, like in The Proposal, where during her wedding, Sandra Bullock admits to using Ryan Reynolds in order to gain a green card, or in While You Were Sleeping, when during her wedding, Sandra Bullock admits that she lied about being the fiance of the guy she's been in love with for years after he finds himself with amnesia. Dang, Sandra, this is a weird thing to be typecast for. While You Were Sleeping is clearly superior though. Anyways, my point being, these female protagonists will typically take accountability for their actions, which makes us root for them because we realize they're making the difficult decision and choosing to take the moral high ground instead of continuing in the lie. And let's be real, usually they don't face too many repercussions and they still get their happily ever after. But it seems like female protagonists nowadays don't really have to own up to their mistakes, and they're not held accountable for their actions.
After all that, I just want him to hold himself accountable.
Are you serious?
And the thing is, if we don't own up to our mistakes, or if the people around us don't hold us accountable, then no growth can ever occur. And that applies to real life and to our fictional characters. My personal favorite example of this is in a little movie called Wonder Woman 1984.
God help us so.
A movie so bad, I think the public zeitgeist collectively chose to forget this movie ever existed. Assuming that we've all collectively pretended that this movie was just a COVID fever dream, let's recap what happens. So Miss Wonder Gadot Woman finds herself missing Mr. Not Steve Rogers and is able to unintentionally wish him back to life with the magic conch. And instead of just being manifest into existence, which nobody would have questioned, Patty Jenkins had the big brain idea to have Chris Pine possess an actual dude, which brings up a lot of moral ramifications about whether sacrificing the existence of a completely innocent man for the sake of the man she loves is justified. But no, they don't give this man a second thought. And like Patty, I get the magic conch is supposed to have consequences for wishes, but you told us that the consequences for this particular wish is Diana losing her powers, so why did this have to be a thing? And if this scenario wasn't already effed as it is, she then proceeds to have intercourse with Steve, who's inhabiting another man's body without that man's consent.
I don't like it.
And ultimately, Diana gives up her wish and lets go of Steve, not because it's the morally right thing to do, but because she needs her powers back. So she's not held accountable and experiences no actual consequences for violating a man, because you can't experience consequences if the movie doesn't think you did anything wrong. Which, if Diana was a man named Dan and Steve was a woman named Stephanie, this would be a completely different story. Oh, and I love that we get an added bonus of her seeing the guy at the end of the movie, no repercussions, and she just looks at this man with the face of, I've totally seen your pee-pee before, and you'll never be the wiser. Which that kind of feels like one of those button choices for men where it's like, sleep with Gal Gadot, but not remember that it actually happened. So it's pretty common for these female protagonists to make these big morally wrong choices that the movie doesn't acknowledge or want to acknowledge as mistakes or moral failings, because female protagonists can't make mistakes or have lapses in judgment. Let's not forget, all the worst dictators in the world have been men, so obviously women are immune from moral failings.
How'd that get in there?
Obviously I'm being facetious, because let's circle back to Nami. Did Nami take accountability for her actions? Did she accept responsibility for her actions and decide to be transparent with those around her? Well, let's take a look. As I mentioned earlier, while Nami was traveling with the Straw Hats, she was secretly working for Arlong and his crew the whole time, and she ends up betraying Luffy and the gang, which ultimately we the audience realize she did those things to save their lives and in order to continue her mission to save Coco Village. However, the fact remains that the consequences of her lying to not just Luffy and the gang, but to the inhabitants of Coco Village have led to her being completely isolated from the friends and family who actually love her. But we finally see her come clean to the duplicitous life she's been living. We see this first when her adopted sister, who Nami's been lying to for years, catches Nami digging up the 100 million berry intended to free Coco Village. Nami admits that she joined Arlong's crew to buy their village's freedom and never told anyone about it because she was afraid of losing anyone like she lost their adopted mom. She finally owns up to why she's kept people at a distance, and because she finally opens up, her relationship with her sister and the village is repaired. Next, once the dirty Marines steal the 100 million berry from Nami and she has no hope of freeing Coco Village, she finally opens up to Luffy and asks for help. Nami doesn't come clean to him about what's going on. She even points out that he shouldn't even be there still because he has no idea what's going on. But even with no context, Luffy knows that Nami is a good person and he doesn't need to know what's going on. He just needs Nami to open up to him, which she does when she asks for his help. When she finally says, "Luffy, help me," after all the times of her pushing him away, she's finally showing that things are not as they seem and that she's been doing this all by herself this whole time. That she needs the help of her new friends because she's out of her depth. And because Luffy is Luffy, he doesn't hold anything Nami did against her. Instead, he places his precious straw hat on her, showing that he forgives her and accepts her as part of the crew still, and emphatically declares he'll help her. And although some of the crew had their doubts about Nami before,
I don't trust her. I don't think she's a good person.
Once their captain decides to help her, they also help her without hesitation, because she's one of them. Nami doesn't necessarily face any repercussions when she comes clean to everyone, but I think that's because they love Nami and choose to forgive her. While lying was not a morally right thing to do, the characters understand what she's been through, and also, the hardship she's endured being isolated on Arlong's crew for all these years is punishment enough. So does Nami take accountability for her actions?
Yes!
I absolutely believe so. To be accountable is to account for one's actions. Pretty straightforward. But basically, in other words, it means to be fully transparent. Nami withheld her true intentions from everyone in order to prevent herself from being hurt. She owns up to her actions to her sister, and by extension her village, and she finally decides to be vulnerable and open up to Luffy and the crew. But ultimately, accountability is not measured by the words you use, but by the actions you take. And with Nami, we see a clear change in her once she accepts her role as a member of the Straw Hat crew. We see her help Luffy to retrieve the Grand Line map from Arlong and express clear regret over helping Arlong gain maps of the East Blue. We see her apologize to her mom at her mom's gravestone and swear to always look after the ones she cares about, which shows the complete 180 in her character since she began the show as closed off to everyone to now ending the season with being open and willing to put it all on the line for her friends. We see her thank her sister for doing a cover-up tattoo on her, and finally we see her help make Luffy's Jolly Roger into a reality. reality. Which yes, Usopp is for sure the one who designed it, but there's no doubt in my mind that it was Nami's idea to do it, since throughout the series we always see her observe the things that matter to Luffy. And similarly to how she initially scoffs at his hat but ultimately fixes it, I believe we see a repeat of that scene as she initially scoffs at his Jolly Roger art, but is the one to reveal the updated one to him. So yeah, we not only see her acknowledge her mistakes, but take actions to fix them. Because of this, she's able to move forward as a member of the Straw Hat crew and repair the relationships with her friends and family. So let's move on to the next test. Number 3. Does the female protagonist take on historically masculine traits without being allowed to embrace her femininity? Okay, what do I mean when I say historically masculine traits? Masculinity is traditionally characterized by the depiction of men as being strong, competitive, successful, courageous, assertive, independent, and overall capable leaders. And we see a lot of male protagonists that exemplify these qualities in a healthy and engaging way. Just look no further than Aragorn. He's a freaking strong and capable leader who also writes poetry for his girlfriend and is comfortable platonically touching his male friends and cries without embarrassment.
This right here is my favorite thing ever in the history of forever. I think about this every day.
However, a lot of time, because films are meant to be over-dramatic and have larger-than-life versions of reality, we see hypermasculinity portrayed, which is just an exaggerated version of traditional masculinity. This is characterized by the overemphasis of the depictions of men that I previously listed. Strength and competition are instead manifested in violence and domination. Their emotions are usually relegated to anger or purely stoicism. We see repression and rejection of compassion and emotional expression due to these traits being deemed as too feminine, and a real man shows no weakness. Hypermasculinity is also represented by looks and physique, as in men being portrayed as having big muscles and the Dorito chip physique. Hypermasculinity is not inherently a bad thing. We love stoic characters. Look at any classic western with Clint Eastwood or John Wayne in it. And we love badass male protagonists who mow down hundreds of bad guys using the power of violence like in John Wick. And we for sure love the idealized superhero bodies. Movies with a male protagonist with these hypermasculine qualities typically include female counterparts who are portrayed more often than not as dependent on the masculine lead, and her world revolves around him. In essence, based on how masculinity has traditionally been portrayed, essentially as the epitome of strength, traditional femininity is seen as the opposite of this, as in femininity equates to weakness. And then the problem is some bad stuff happened in Hollywood that I mentioned earlier in this video, so now all hypermasculinity, and really any sort of masculinity, is deemed bad. And I think Hollywood wants to seem like they're not all that bad, and the Weinstein thing was totally a one-off anomaly. So they wanted to show that women are actually not weak, but are in fact strong. So how do we show they're strong? By removing their traditional feminine qualities, aka their warmth, gentleness, sensitivity, supportiveness, empathy, humility, tenderness, kindness, and the like, and instead injecting them with all the hyper-masculine traits we've just gone over. In recent memory, Galadriel from Rings of Power is one of the worst offenders of this.
Is wrong with you?
I like Tolkien as much as the next nerd, and like others, was shocked by just how off the mark the Rings of Power version of Galadriel is, from the Galadriel we've come to know and love and fear from what we've seen and read from the Lord of the Rings. Now, based on Tolkien lore, Galadriel can be seen as the epitome of femininity. She has beauty that surpasses even elvish standards. She's graceful, kind, patient, has a family, and will typically dress in all white, and is overall good. And while she has all these traditionally feminine qualities, everyone also understands she's powerful and you don't mess with her. It's almost like being feminine and strong are not mutually exclusive.
No way!
Not only does she stand taller than all elf women at 6 feet 4 inches, which kind of missed the mark on that one with Morfydd Clark, she's described in the Unfinished Tales as strong of body, mind, and will. From her earliest years, she had a marvelous gift of insight into the minds of others, but judged them with mercy and understanding, and she withheld her goodwill from none. When she gains the ring Nenya, this serves to only amplify her powers. Overall, all of these qualities help her to be a capable leader of Lothlorien, along with her husband, Celeborn. So, which of these aspects and fine qualities did they use for the Rings of Power, Galadriel? I'm not kidding. The only thing that makes Rings of Power Galadriel resemble Lord of the Rings Galadriel is the fact that she's blonde and has pointy ears, I guess, and is like an Olympian level swimmer. Nah, actually I think that's just exclusive to the Rings of Power Galadriel. Instead of the character I described previously, we get a character who's combative with everyone she talks to.
There's a tempest in me.
Physically dominates everyone and everything around her, which makes no sense when you look at how small she is, and the only emotion she shows is stoicism and anger, except that one time she did show happiness, which seemed excruciating for both her and the viewing audience, so that was never attempted again.
In fact, never play this again.
And we see that she lacks any traits that are considered feminine, such as kindness or empathy, which is apparent when we see in episode 1, she doesn't give a flying about the people in her command. It's probably because those child elves were mean to her when she was a kid, so I guess that trauma justifies her behavior, or whatever. In summation, we clearly traded our beautiful and perfect Galadriel for a hyper-masculine Galadriel.
You turned my beautiful
Galadriel
into a nightmare!
It's just wild to me that Galadriel, who's an elf renowned for her ethereal beauty and grace, is completely stripped of her femininity. And for what? To portray this cheap and fake version of strength, when the true version of Galadriel described by Tolkien is a far stronger character than the Rings of Power version of Galadriel could ever be? Oh. And as a cherry on top of this hyper-masculinized Galadriel tree, let's not forget this magazine cover, where Galadriel is posed in a classically male pose to assert her dominance and strength.
Why do you always have your legs open? Load your legs.
So let's get to the brass and taxes with Nami. Is she allowed to be feminine, or are her feminine traits sacrificed on the altar of hyper-masculinity? Yeah, there's no comparison. While Galadriel is cold and ruthless, Nami is allowed to be empathetic and warm, while also being able to be both a competent fighter, as well as one of the most strong-willed and intelligent characters. Matt Owens, one of the showrunners of the live-action One Piece, describes Nami as kind of like an older sister surrounded by a group of younger brothers. And I think that's the perfect description of her. She takes on the nurturing and empathetic big sister role in the crew, and along with that, she's also the smart one who always wants them to think through their actions and make a plan versus just rushing in swords a-blazing, which is definitely Luffy and Zoro style. Even though she's tough on the exterior due to the facade she's had to put on for years, she's extremely kind and devoted to the people she cares about. Let's look at how her actions support this. She's the one who repairs Luffy's hat because she knows how much it means to him. She's the one who pushes Zoro to talk to Luffy and see how he's doing after confronting Garp, Luffy's grandpa. She's the one who will use her wits and determination to save the ones she cares about, like Kaya when Kuro is trying to kill her, or Luffy from Arlong after Luffy loses to him at Baratier. And while Galadriel knew only how to be stoic or angry and never was allowed to be vulnerable because that's a feminine trait that implies weakness, damn it, Nami is shown to be holding in all of her emotions but always seeming to be on the brink of breaking until finally all of her frustrations and fear and anger and sadness come to a head in the Luffy help me scene. And does that make her weak? Not in the slightest. The fact that she finally asks for help after years of trying to do things all on her own shows the immense growth she's gone through. So yeah, I would say Nami is allowed to exhibit her feminine qualities and still be seen as strong and capable. What a concept. And come on, they gave her a Disney princess moment to just enjoy trying on dresses at a rich person's house because she's never had the opportunity to do this before. An added bonus, she tries to get Luffy's opinion on the dresses and he's useless at giving one. Anyways, moving on to the final test. Oh, how the time flies when we're having so much fun.
Hello darkness, my old friend.
Number 4. Is the female protagonist surrounded by weaker and dumber male characters who are meant to bolster her own greatness. Remember how we talked about hypermasculinity, which is the over-exaggeration of masculinity? Well, my friends, we're now seeing the opposite side of the coin being perpetuated in an attempt by Hollywood to overcorrect, which is hypomasculinity. This one is a weird trend that started rising at about the same time as the rise of the strong female character. It stands to reason that if you have a strong female character, you absolutely cannot have a strong male character to challenge the strong female character and make her star shine less brightly, because that's against the rules.
He wanted to keep my star from shining too brightly.
It's kind of like how people in the corporate world will be envious of their coworkers outperforming them, so instead of trying to be better themselves, they instead try to drag others down in order to make themselves look better. Which Hollywood is a horrible place filled with envious career ladder climbers, so we love to see them projecting this kind of behavior into their writing. You see, in newer movies and shows being being made, instead of the women being empowered through their individual actions, we see them instead empowered by tearing everyone else down, especially the men. Which, to be honest, that kind of makes me feel less empowered because they're saying the only way for women to be empowered is if we neuter, figuratively, and it seems like many people want it literally as well, the men.
I don't want it.
I mean, for example, look no further than modern day movies and shows, especially Disney, where men constantly need to be humbled and put into their place by their stronger and more capable female counterparts.
No, 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 no. Wait.
As is the natural order. I guess if I was to give a specific example of this occurrence, like I've done in the previous sections, I feel like it would be remiss of me if I didn't bring up one of the most infamous examples in recent memory. The tip of the iceberg, if you will. The one that started signaling to wider audiences, myself included, that Hollywood maybe, just maybe, might have it out for men.
Because I'm better than you? Or might just literally get murdered. It's so dumb. I can't even exist without being a derivative of the Hulk.
There's a hot chick over there. I'm gonna go talk to it.
These dodos never had to deal with this on their first day at work.
He's never had to prove his value to a parade of underwhelming men.
I could do this all day.
Oh yeah, this is low-hanging fruit, but come on, these writers made it too easy.
No, God! No, God!
This show's main goal is to show how much our girl boss She-Hulk can girl boss, and boy, is she gonna girl boss. She's gonna girl boss so hard all over the place. She's gonna girl boss all over you, and your spouse, and your family, and your children, and your goat. But for seriously, the majority of the men in this show are either portrayed as incompetent, an incel, or a harasser, or in the case of the main villain, an incompetent, harassing incel. Gross. And the men in this show who don't fall under any of these categories, mainly Daredevil, are ultimately undermined in some way or another to bolster Jen. You really have to look no further than episode 1. Jen starts off the episode by asserting her dominance over the toxic white male.
You go, girl!
And then she hangs out with her toxic white male cousin. Wait, I thought we used to like him, right? Well, not anymore, because he's smothering Jen's awesomeness with his inherent patriarchy. And oh, I guess they're in a car crash now. Good thing Jen is a girl boss and can save her incompetent male cousin who— Wait, didn't this guy literally save the world several times over? But we're gonna have the lawyer who has no experience in this kind of world-saving business be the one to get them out of this situation? Well, that's fine, because Jen must shine bright like a supernova, so she rips a car door off and drags a fully grown man to safety? Oh. Well, anyways, and then we have his blood accidentally drip into Jen's wound because it would be too problematic to keep with She-Hulk's original origin story where Bruce saves Jen and has to give her his blood without her consent in order to save her life. But who needs moral conundrums like that when a strong and capable woman can just take care of the situation so you don't have to think that hard? And then Jen asserts her new girl boss powers, which make her look fabulous by almost murdering a group of guys that didn't actually do anything to her besides bother her. And oh, time for a training montage.
Oh, yeah.
And the toxic white man, who has now evolved to a problematic green man, tries to teach Jen how to control her newfound powers. But of course, she doesn't need help from the man who has spent over a decade mastering these powers, because Jen was always a powerful girl boss, but now it's physically manifest for all the world to see. So what could freaking Bruce possibly teach her? So, you feel empowered yet? Because I, on the other hand, feel like taking a nap. I'm glad you never had to experience this humiliation, Edward Norton. But yeah, I think the worst part of this episode is when Jen femsplains how hard it is to be a woman, which based on everything we've seen her character experience, I don't actually believe she's ever experienced true hardship on the same level Bruce Banner has. But yes, we can't have the Hulk, you know, the guy that has spent over a decade mastering his anger, mansplain how to control his anger to Jen, because that would tear Jen down from her perfect and superior pedestal.
Why wouldn't you listen to someone who's been through all this before?
Smash the patriarchy.
So Bruce just rolls over and takes it during this scene. And we're not even going to talk about Daredevil, which, in all fairness, they didn't completely tear him down in order to bolster Jen. They actually give him a moment to shine and show just how dumb Jen is. Although he does experience a slight teardown.
Shame!
My point with Jen is that the only way this show tries to assert that Jen is a strong female character is slightly through her actions, but mostly through her demasculating. Wait, is that a word? Demasculating.
Is it emasculating or demasculating?
Whatever. Okay, metaphorically castrating the men around her, which crazy enough doesn't actually make me like or empathize with her as a character. Because you want to know why women started watching the MCU back in the day, and I'll 100% put myself in this category? I promise you, it wasn't to watch empowered women. Let me tell you that right now. Just give me what I want, Marvel. You had one job. Also, side note, men, I acknowledge these are not realistic body standards, so I affirm you and your dad bods because let's be real. Yes, it's totally achievable for these Hollywood actors to achieve their perfect 5% body fat physiques by, you know, just sleeping 8 hours, eating chicken and broccoli, and also, of course, having a big helping of trembolone sandwiches with a side of other for sure natural and totally legal supplements. So I just want you to know I hear you and I see you. Aww. But also, look at this, what the man? What was I talking about again? Alright, women started watching the MCU because we love strong men. And the first Avengers movie was great because we got both empowered hot females and empowered hot men. Peak cinema. So now that we've gone on this little side quest, can we now accurately judge if Nami is a strong character through her own merits? Or did she have to knock Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji down a couple pegs to assert her strength? Nami is never portrayed as a Mary Sue or the only character on the Straw Hat crew who's capable of fighting, or the only one coming up with plans or smart ideas. And none of the men on the crew are portrayed as bumbling idiots who wouldn't be able to survive without Nami. They're a team with different members who display different strengths and different weaknesses, all valuable and all crucial to the crew in their own way. Man, it's actually just refreshing watching each of these characters be allowed to shine in their own individual ways. Much like in an actual team setting in real life, everyone on the Straw Hat crew brings their own secret sauce to the menu, and their weaknesses are filled in by the strengths of the other members of the crew. But there's also a respect for each other's strengths that exists amongst the team. For example, Usopp, who's the team's weakest member when it comes to fighting, excels at telling stories that, while not entirely true, bring joy to the people who listen to him, and Luffy and the gang support him in that, and they never try to tear him down or make him feel less.
3 cheers for Captain Usopp! We couldn't have done it without him!
But back to Nami. We see Nami as a capable fighter, but honestly, that's not her main strength. I think it's pretty much understood that the fighting skills of Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy surpass her own abilities. But again, Nami's main strengths are her navigating skills, her intelligence, and her empathy. But also, she's not the only one who's allowed to be smart. Remember, it's Luffy who comes up with the idea to knock Buggy's different body parts into the crates in order to defeat him. I mean, episode 1 alone establishes all the strengths she brings to the table when we see how she can easily outsmart others, come up with plans, and fight. But we also see her respect and not feel the need to demasculate the men around her. Her male co-leads are never torn down to bolster her own character. She's also not portrayed as some moral paragon, and the men are allowed to challenge her perspectives. Luffy's never-ending persistence in being there for her eventually helps her to break down and acknowledge that her current way of going about life is not working, and to realize it's okay to rely on your friends. Basically, we get both strong women and strong men in this show. And the crazy thing is, both men and women like this show. Weird coincidence, right? It's almost like if you portray both sexes in a positive light, then more people are going to like your show, while vilifying the men surprisingly results in alienating 50% of your audience.
That's not possible.
Crazy how that works, right? And that, my friends, concludes the PENIS test. Our girl Nami passed with flying colors, which I never had a doubt in my mind that she would. Mainly because I created the test and wrote the script for the video, but that's besides the point. Completely irrelevant. At the end of the day, I think Nami's character shows us that it's really not hard to make a compelling female character. The problem seems to be that Hollywood is so focused on making women appear strong and perfect due to the social climate we live in nowadays. I mean, even Daisy Ridley doesn't think Rey Palpatine has any weaknesses.
So yeah.
Do you think she has any just kind of inherent weaknesses or...
I mean, I don't really believe in weaknesses in people.
Okay.
How Rey beat Kylo Ren?
Why is that so hard for people to get? Like, she's super strong and he's like so weak.
I wonder why audiences failed to connect with her. Who cares? It's definitely a good idea to make another movie about her, but I don't know, man. To me, only allowing these female characters to only be strong and never show emotion, or never to allow them to experience hardship and adversity, feels like a disservice to what the actual women experience is. These characters don't make me feel empowered, they don't make me feel strong, they don't make me feel seen. They make me feel looked down upon because these writers feel the need to ignore reality in an attempt to uplift these fictional, idealized, strong women. Like, am I weak? Because I know for a fact I could never overpower a man like these women constantly do, or that I would never act like a cold and unfeeling girl boss like they do, or that I try my best not to talk down to those around me, but try to offer the same respect that I would expect others to show me. Does that make me weak? Does that make me not a girl boss? Do I need to abandon womanhood in order to be seen as strong?
Who am I?
At the end of the day, let's stop making movies a battle of the sexes because it's exhausting. Let's stop hyper-focusing on how many times the guy saves the girl or how many times the girl saves the guy. Let's stop letting the Bechdel test, or any freaking test for that matter, including this dumb fake test I just made for the basis of this video, dictate our stories, but instead let well-written and compelling characters define our stories. Let's do away with the strong female protagonist and instead bring in more strong characters who also happen to be female. Because man, I'm just so tired and just want to watch good characters. Now let's just pray that season 2 of live action One Piece is actually good and breaks the Netflix season 2 curse. I'm looking at you, Arcane season 2. Anyways, that's all I had. So it's been real, it's been fun, but it hasn't been real fun.